One feature I wish Flutter would add is the ability to decorate container borders directly with a gradient and animate it. Unfortunately, that does not exist. So in this video, we'll be going over how I filled a container with a gradient, animated the gradient, turned it into a border, and finally add a corresponding gradient glow to the animating border. So if you're interested, keep watching and let's get into it. Here, we have a new Flutter project with no app bar and floating action button since we won't need those for this example. And for the body, I've added a new animated gradient border widget that has a single container with the color white. The first thing we want to do is add gradient to this container. This can easily be done by assigning the gradient parameter in the box decoration. Before we animate the gradient, let's look at how exactly this is done. Just want to give a shout out to Flutter Guy's channel for giving me this great idea. To animate the gradient, all we want to do is interpolate between one alignment to the next. So since the color red starts at the top left, we will move it to the top right, then bottom right, then bottom left, then back to top left. We will continue this pattern indefinitely as it loops. For the color blue, we start on the bottom right. We'll be doing the same by moving clockwise. Now, let's prepare our animated gradient border widget for animation. The first thing we gotta do is add the single ticker provider state mixin. Yeah, that's quite a mouthful. Along with our animation controller plus top left and bottom right alignment animations that we are about to define on init state. We will create a tween sequence container to describe how we want the gradient to move. In this case, just like how I was showing you before, we will move from top left to top right to bottom right to bottom left, and bottom left back to top left. Don't forget to add the dot animate with the controller at the end, and apply the same logic to the bottom right align anim, but here we start from the bottom right. And then we repeat it forever. To add our newly created animation sequences, wrap the container in an animated builder and set the linear gradient begin and end value to the corresponding align anim values. Great, looks like our gradient is spinning correctly. To turn our animating gradient into a border, we'll need to add an inverted mask cutout. We can achieve this in Flutter by using clip path. This will result in the middle of the container being completely transparent, so anything behind will be visible. Wrap the animated builder with a clip path widget. We'll then create a center cut path class that takes in radius and thickness of the border. FYI, clip path is apparently expensive according to Flutter's documentation, but I couldn't really find another way to achieve the effect that we are going for here, so we're just gonna use it anyway. Center cut path will inherit from custom clipper, which means we will need to override the getClip method. And this is where we'll be cutting out the middle of our container, therefore turning it into just a border. First, define a rectangle area that this clip will affect. Notice that this area needs to be big enough not only to contain the size of the widget, but also its animating glowing shadow, which we'll add later. Create a path object, which is used to determine what to cut out as well as add the area that we want to affect. Then override the should reclip method. Finally, let's round our borders. We now have a pretty nice looking animated gradient border, but let's take it a step further and add glow to it. In order to add the glow, we'll need to do some magical hackery. What we'll do is create two containers, one with a red shadow and the other one with a blue shadow. The red one will be the exact same size as the base container with no animation, while the blue one will be almost the exact same size. The keyword here is almost, and it will be animated using the same animation as the blue border. One thing to note is that while these shadow containers will be transparent, we will still be able to see the shadow behind the container. In order to avoid this, we add the shadow containers into a stack along with the base gradient container and apply clip path to the whole thing. First, we'll wrap our gradient container that's inside the animated builder with a stack. We'll need to wrap everything inside the build method with a layout builder. This is so we have access to the widget's constraints. Now add the first container with a red shadow. This one does not animate. Then we add our other container with a blue shadow inside an alignment widget and add the bottom right align anim value to the alignment property. As you can see, we now have a glowing animated border. Before we implement an option to add a child to the widget and have it fill the area inside the border, let's quickly clean up the widget and make it reusable. First, add these properties to the stateful widget. Then go ahead and replace all the constant values inside the widget using these. Maybe I should have done this from the beginning. Oh well. Now, to add our child, we'll need to utilize our trusty friend, the stack widget again. Just make sure to check whether the child is null or not, and then add it inside a clip rect. So the same amount of rounded corners on the border is also applied to the child that is passed in. In the main .dot file, let's add a child into our animated gradient border. First, we are going to add hello world text to the middle of the container. And then, let's make the background of the container white. Adjust the text so it's centered and make it black so it's visible on our new white background.
Hooray, we did it! Isn't this the most exciting thing you've ever done in your life? I know! It's so amazing!
Make sure to click that like and subscribe buttons if you enjoyed. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. See you next time.